So welcome everybody to the second hour of Mind Shifters Radio. And today is Tuesday, January the 25th, 2022. And their call-in number is 563-999-3581 and press 1. And that puts you into queue to talk to us. We'd love to hear your comments and your questions because that makes this your show. We'll give Michael a moment to dial in. I'll invite you to go to our website, as I always do. Why, again, WHYAGAIN.org. And you can click the Start Here button. You can scroll down and hit the bullseye. There's lots of places you can go. There's lots of things to see and just look at what all's going on. While I'm waiting on Michael to dial in, wanted to share that we got an email yesterday, and it was really exciting. It was from a lady in Poland, and, I mean, just out of the blue, she writes, and she says, let me find it here. I love the work. When I first saw the lecture on YouTube, and she gives me the link of which one she watched, it was like 7 years ago that this YouTube was made. I live in Poland, and I am sure that more people would be happy to enjoy this work. Can I translate this lecture into Polish and put it on YouTube as well? Of course, saying and writing everywhere that it's your work and that I just translate it. I would, of course, put the link to your lecture and to this website. It helped me a lot in a time when I needed it most. So I want to spread the word for others, other people in need that maybe don't speak English. Please write and let me know what you think. And so we wrote her back and told her absolutely we would be delighted, and that if she sent us the link that we would put it on our website so anybody, that spoke Polish could click on it and watch it from our website as well, and that we would give her the accolades for doing the translation and everything. And she just wrote back and said, "Thank you, you all are angels." And so that was pretty cool. So then we mentioned to her about also translating the book, and she said that she would translate the lecture first, and then she would be glad to translate the book. So that's underway. So that's exciting. Welcome, Michael. Hello, Michael.
Thank you, dear heart. I had a little difficulty getting to my mute button. So welcome, everybody. Honored and delighted that you're here as we step into the next layer of the conversation about first century Aramaic forgiveness and the profound, profound gifts that it offers. And I was talking to someone yesterday who really touched into and realized that one of the things that they were doing was literally terrorizing themselves. And in terrorizing themselves, they were terrorizing others. And of course, that doesn't mean going out and getting a gun and pointing at itself or somebody else, but thoughts that are of a disintegrative nature that are disproportionate to the events of the moment. So out of that conversation came the question of, an invitation for everybody who's listening to look at, do you terrorize yourself? Do you terrorize others? Did you have a terrorist parent that you desperately wanted to get away from? Something like terrorizing thoughts are usually generational. Remember the power person dynamic from the codependence workshop, and that when that dynamic is operative in the mind, there are only 3 levels of behavior possible, depending on the level of stress one is under. And when there's no stress, one will tend to do whatever they did to get along with their power person. When stress starts to build, they'll do whatever they did to resist and survive with the power person. And when they become ultra-stressed, they'll do what the power person did to them that they hated the most. Now, of course, everybody would say, no, I would never do that. I hated that. Well, that's true. You did. But remember that the power person dynamic is instilled in the mind when one is in an unconscious condition, when the energy field is opened. Those 3 factors we've talked about, when Somebody has more power over one's life than that individual does when they're not functioning as love. If that situation perceives it as survival. In that situation, one opens one's field wide. So if a power person, this person who had control and won over you, terrorized you to do it, then in those moments of extreme terror, the energy field of it's usually a child, not always, but the energy field of the child opens and becomes like a sponge. And that's just, just like a sponge. That the energy dynamic of that is just sucked right in. 2, 10, 20, 50, 80 years later, if that's never been addressed and dealt with, 3 levels of behavior. No stress, you do what you did to get along. Stress builds, you do what you did to resist and survive. Ultra stressed, you do what your power person did to you that you hated the most. And so when that behavior occurs, there's a little trick the mind plays. It is precisely, oftentimes right down to exactly the same word patterns as the power person terrorized with. But when your power person, if you were the subject of that, and your power person did that to you, it was really clear they were terrorizing you. I got to get out of here. But in the future, what happens at the unconscious level is one looks into the unconscious and says, oh, I'm in a high stress, ultra stress situation. Who do I know that won in this situation consistently? Oh, my power person. Well, let me look, and this is all an unconscious resonance process. Let me look at what my power person did, and that's what I'll do. Now, of course, I'm not going to call it terrorizing someone. I'll have a different title for it. I'll change the way I label the very behavior that my power person did to me that I pass on to someone else. And by relabeling it makes it acceptable. Then it might look like, well, I'm just calling attention to things for them. Well, I'm just, correcting them. Well, I'm just making sure that they hear me. Whatever the dynamic is, that game gets changed. So, terrorist thoughts can be things like, well, what could have happened? Well, a million things could have happened, but they didn't. Why would you terrorize yourself with that or someone else? Because you want to control your own behavior or control them, perhaps? It might be worth taking a look at. In a world where everybody's doing it, that kind of behavior looks normal. It's not normal for a human to do. They are not healthy. They're not healthy for the person who's engaging in them. They're not healthy for anyone else, even though in your family system they might have been the norm. And so if you find yourself doing that, utilizing in any given situation a fantasy disintegrative thought and forcing it on yourself or forcing it on someone else, that's self-terrorism. And you'll notice that, we live in a culture, just taking a look at the political situation today, you'll notice that almost half the country, year after year in the political realm, is, doing their best to force terrorist thoughts on the other half of the country. Or taking out those terrorist thoughts on people who they consider to be their opposition or their enemy. And so it just seemed, after that conversation with someone yesterday, that it might be something worth taking a look at. And here's what we deserve. And it doesn't matter what we've done. Treatment that someone deserves is not dependent upon their behavior. That's why the commitment is, I promise to trust you enough to tell you the truth and treat you lovingly, gently, and with respect. And when you realize how profoundly impacted we can be by these disintegrative energies, then the undoing, the forgiving of that inclination, and usually there is hostility attached to those energetic dynamics of terrorist thoughts. So a tool that we've got, and you can go to the website to download this, is called My Commitment. This comes from the Healing Through Relationships workshop. And so I'd like to make this commitment to you. And, somebody might say, well, but they don't deserve that. It's like, okay, I agree with you. I saw what they did. They sure don't deserve it. But the question is not, do they deserve it? The question is, do you deserve it? Because whatever you engage in, whenever you terrorize someone with your thought, no matter how subtle the implication is, you get the original. You're the one whose body says, oh my God, I've got to protect against this. I've got to tighten. I have to lock up. I have to defend myself. And that's oftentimes what leads to disease processes. So whatever somebody's done, here's what they deserve. I promise to trust you enough to tell you the truth and be true to you. I commit to always being sweetness in your life, to nurture you daily, and to treat you lovingly, gently, and with respect in my thoughts, words, and actions, whether in your presence or not. In every interaction, I commit to affection for you, to look for and acknowledge the highest and best in you as I surrender to love, our true nature. I will use only voice tones that reflect my deep caring for you, my connection to my source, my relationship with you, and our serenity will always be more important than any issue. I open my heart to embrace you in my love. I open my heart to be embraced in your love. Now, if you do that, the tendency is going to be for all hell to break loose, because it's a different energy than most people have engaged in. It's an empowering set of thoughts, and it's empowering energy rather than terrorizing energy, and vitality will automatically lift. And when vitality lifts, what's hidden under the surface? So the last paragraph of the commitment is, if anything unlike love comes up, I will hold this in my heart and listen as I learn to speak, experience, and be responsible for my own realities. I'm here for and with you. I promise to keep communication open and keep love conscious, active, and present as we heal, celebrate life, and grow together. Now, my offering is the reason you want to do that with everyone in your life. Well, I just had somebody that committed a crime. Well, you know something? You should call the police and report them. And if the police see that there is reason for a crime and a charge of a crime, then you should press those charges. And you should go to court and you should testify about what happened, especially if it's something that's a danger. It could be a danger to others. You could be doing people a great favor. Well, that sure doesn't sound like it's in harmony with the commitment. Oh, absolutely, 2,000%. If someone's committed a crime in my presence, I need this energetic pattern in my field to keep me healthy, whatever they have done. Too many people predicate their behavior on what other people do, which means they have no standard of their own. People say, well, I did that because I felt like doing it. Well, I have an invitation for you to consider. Never do what you feel like doing ever again. Because if you do what you feel like doing, most people's feelings or emotions come from the unconscious. And so they're doing behaviors based on and motivated by what's in their unconscious. And often it turns out horribly. Pick a standard. Now, this commitment might be a good standard for you to consider. If not, go searching the world, find one, or create one. But choose to have a standard by which you live, and instead of basing your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviors on what other people do, which is what most of the world is doing. Oh, I'm nice when other people are nice to me. Well, shouldn't I be nasty to somebody if they're nasty to me? Well, if I want the original of nasty, I should be nasty with them. Do they deserve it? Well, they might. Do I deserve it? Is the question you need to ask yourself. It takes huge discipline to recognize that you only want to source thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and attitudes in your life that come from love. That's it. Your true nature. You know, if you've ever held a newborn child and tapped into the essence of the newborn, you know that the newborn is love. You know that that's who and what you are. Now, if you act like that's not what you are, you have a really serious problem. But notice your mind can trick you into blaming everybody else. Well, it's your fault that I'm doing this. Excuse me. You've done this 87 different times with 42 different people. Cut the crap. It's no one else's fault. But what you do is your responsibility. So we invite you to look at, and this commitment might be what works. It's something that has been in development for 40 years in my life. It's autobiographical. You'll get to look at it. If you go through every issue in there, you'll get to see what I've gone through. And basically the commitment started out very simply. It was just a couple of lines. And then each time I came across a situation where I didn't feel loving, I stopped, got back to a space of connectedness, and looked at what is the mind energy I can put into the model of the behavior I want to bring forward into the world. What's that going to look like? And that's how the commitment developed, piece by piece by piece. And if you look back over the years, you'll see several different renditions of it. In fact, there's some thoughts in this one that haven't been printed in the latest copy of the commitment because they're new. It's an ongoing live commitment. And I just put it out there that, you know, you might want to start and work on one of your own. It might take you 40 years. You might model it after this and you'll be done in 10 minutes, or you might just take this one. I'll just offer that if you find yourself unable to live what you say you're committed to living, and maybe you blame everybody else for it because you don't do it, then you need to start to set up a system of thoughts that supports you in living what you say you're committed to living. And stop lying to yourself that you're only doing and saying, feeling, expressing, puking on others because of what they do. Because it's just a lie. It's the lie most people live. You know, I'm only saying this because you deserve it. Well, if you're going to get to what people deserve, this commitment is what they deserve. And why do they deserve it? Because you do. And if you originate thoughts, emotions, behaviors based on that commitment, then I guarantee your life is going to soar. Otherwise, you'll tend to play out the unconscious dynamics. You know, Carl Jung has a powerful saying where he says, our mentality is distinguished by the shameless naivety with which we judge our enemy. And in the judgment we pronounce upon him or her, we unwittingly reveal our own defects. We simply accuse our enemy of our own unadmitted faults. Do you have hostility or fear around the behavior of what someone else does? Then that's your fault. You have hostility or fear about. It doesn't mean that you can't stay connected to a space of love and invite or hold somebody accountable for things that are off the mark. But it does mean that you've got to have a clear pathway to consciously move into being consistent on all levels. You know, if we lived in a world, if what was modeled for us as children, and for most of us as children, what was modeled is the blame game. Whatever I'm going through, it's somebody else's fault. We watched, we heard, we listened and saw it happen. We heard people say things like, you make me so mad. And my offering is that's the biggest lie that's ever been told. And virtually everybody on the planet is telling themselves and everybody else that lie. There comes a point where we must recognize that the blame game that we've had modeled by authorities in our lives, you know, if we had a power person who terrorized us, then that's probably the game we play, even though we tell ourselves the lie that that's not really what we're doing. And you just need to look at the fruit. You know, they said to Yeshua, how do you tell what's really going on in somebody's mind? He says, you look at their fruit. Look at the results you're producing. That's the game we play, that blame game. Then we've taught those around us. We've modeled for others that game. And when they become as good at that fraud as we are, it's destructive to life. You know, our offering is that life is love flowing through a cell. Period. And blame is reflected in speech, like, you know, if you did it to me, you make me angry. And the offering here is that you've never been angry, you've never been sad, you've never been afraid of anyone else. When you've been in that form of upset, you've been in that form of that upset because that upset is in you. When you tell your mind the lie that you're upset because of someone else, then your mind will literally generate a perceptual construct where somebody else shows up in your mind causing your upset. But that's all part of the fraud of the mind. So you've never been sad or angry about anything, but if there's sad and anger in you, anything can bring it up. And when you language that you're sad or angry about that, then you cut yourself off from the ability to heal. When you use words to instruct your mind to generate realities that make your perennial anger look like it's about or caused by them, your mind, just like everyone else's, obeys and generates constructs that reflect the lie that somehow it's they who are the cause of what's moving in you. These perceptions are hallucination, and most of the population is living in an hallucination. We need to wake up from our hallucinations. Here's how they're formed. When I live in denial, when I speak or think as though something outside of us is the cause of what's happening inside of us, you know, things like, you made me mad, it means your mind has to hide the real cause of what's at the root of that particular painful energy. And then it has to create a false picture of another cause. In doing that, a part of your mind is now hidden by the dissociation caused by denial. It's no longer available to you for change or for healing. But you can rest assured it will always contribute its pain whenever something resonates it into activity. So your mind attaches its unconscious pain to its pictures, its perceptions, and the cycle's complete. With perception, we block the world of the Creator, the world of love, and substitute a false picture. You might call it a graven image. It's an hallucination in which our pain is projected. And projection we would define as image making out of denied dissociated content in our minds, that into our brain's image of them, and then seeing our projection as a true picture, we become convinced that they are the cause of our pain. This unsane error thinking must be interrupted. You'll notice that every time you've experienced a particular form of pain, you've been there. It is in you, it is yours, and to be rid of it requires direct rather than projected access to the root of that pain. In other words, when I lie and say you made me mad, I'll take the mad part of my mind attached to my brain's image of you, and I indirectly experience being mad, but I believe the picture in my mind that is caused by you. I need to come back into direct relationship with that mad, with the energy at the root of that, rather than projected into my brain's image of you. You experience pain because it's hidden and unresolved within you, not because someone resonates what's already there. Carl Jung had another really powerful thought to offer us on that. He said, until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will direct our lives, and we will call it fate. Once again, remember that life is love flowing through a cell. And anything that inhibits that, and it's usually fear or hostility, destroys life. We must learn to take, if we want to heal, we must learn to take responsibility for what destroys life in us. Anything that's less than love, and learn to forgive it. This and this alone is true forgiveness. If I want life, I must apply forgiveness to anything in me that is not love. That is where healing happens. And Jeannie tells me that we've got a couple of callers. So I'm going to put those thoughts on hold. And Miss Jeannie, if you would, introduce our caller.
Okay. The first one is Susan, area code 610. You're on the air. And then we have another caller.
Hey.
Hey there, young lady.
I'll
How
try
are
to
you?
be quick with this one. Perfect business with this commitment sheet to send it to my grandson Jacob, who is like cassetting his abusive father toward his mother to the point where she thinks that she can't let him live with her anymore. Jacob is obviously very unhappy, frightened about his life. He's sleeping a lot. He hasn't been able to get a job. He does have a theater job, but he's behind on learning his lines. I want to send him the commitment sheet, but I'm afraid that he's just going to, as you said, all hell will break loose. So I appreciate that you're bringing this up right now, because we just have a practical situation where I need to reach this kid.
Right.
And if you have, I would like to, we give him an allowance every week, and I would like to say, this abusive language is a deal breaker. I can't be supporting a kid who treats his mother that way, but that just sounds like punishing. I don't know where to get a toehold in the kind of language I need for him, and I could use a few suggestions.
Can I put a thought in there?
Oh, please do, Jeannie.
It just made me think. I worked with a woman this weekend, and it's a little bit different, but her daughter has gone off to a college in another state, and her grades have dropped. And so she was asking me what I thought, she could tell her daughter, this next semester you bring those grades up, or you move back home and go to a local community college. Or if you choose to stay at that college, you pay for the college. And so it's given the daughter a choice. I can bring up my grades, or I'll lose my money,
Right.
So you can word it in the fashion that it's their choice, that it's not you doing a punishment, but it's discipline. It's, showing them the right way. It's not punishment, but it's their choice. You can either do this and continue to receive the money, or you don't have the money. And then they can choose how they want to behave from there. And every choice they make has a result.
Well, Jeannie, Tim and I have been giving Jacob an allowance for a long time, and he's 21. So we called him the other day and said, we'd like to change the parameters. You go to choir rehearsal and you go to sing at the service, and you're a professional singer grade level singer, but you can't be paid because your mother is the dean of the cathedral. So we will pay you $50 for a rehearsal, which is the going rate, and $50 for going to the service. And then the other $50 will be for doing chores around the house, which you really should be doing because you're living there, free room and board anyway. But if we get good reports, we'll give you that $50. Well, he got to rehearsal, but he skipped the service, and he was very angry with me for suggesting that we pay, that his chores around the house be hitched with payment. He says, I do tons of chores, which is just an exaggeration. He's very oppositional, and I don't think he's mentally healthy enough, and maybe this is my bad thinking. I think he's too mentally compromised to do what we hope that daughter will do. Sounds as if the daughter may be a reasonable kid underneath it all and be able to pull up her socks and meet the challenge. Jacob folded up his tents after I spoke to him about the last deal, and he has been in bed a great deal and mad at his mother for trying to get him to go down on some meds because he seems dopey. So I guess I'm arguing with you, Jeannie, because we've basically
I hear you.
Challenging him. Yeah, it's been extremely scary for me, and of course I'm doing worksheets on and a mind shifter. It's safe and healing for me to be joyful in my wonderful life, even though Jacob is croaking. And I've only gotten partway through that one. What were you going to say, Michael? Thanks, Jeannie.
Well, my offering would be, first of all, that you don't necessarily ask him to live that commitment. Remember in the earlier part of today's show, I spoke about modeling. People do what's modeled for them. And obviously, Jacob has had, exactly the whole conversation today. Jacob has had terrorizing people modeled for him. So he's gotten pretty good at it. To think about the stories that I've heard about, the family system, that's kind of what was modeled, and so he's playing it out. And so my thought would be that you model something different, which you have been very powerfully, and you might put it in the form of this commitment. Here's what I'm committed to doing with you. That's what I'm going to do. And that might be a starting point. And then, there's nothing, there doesn't have to be anything aligned with punishment to make, say, something like money support conditional. I'm going to hold the space for you, whatever you do. You go to the top of the barrel or the bottom of the barrel. I'm here to hold the space of love for you. But if I'm going to reward you with money, if I'm going to pay you for something, I get to say what that something is. You don't just get to do whatever you want and I have to pay you. That's not how it works. It's a very poor lesson to teach a kid that, well, it doesn't matter what you do, you'll get the money anyway. Because when he goes out to get a job, he finally gets one, he's going to tend to think, well, it doesn't matter what I do, I'll get paid anyway. And the world's going to have a very hard lesson to bring down on his head. And the longer it takes, if a 2-year-old learns that, a child at 2 learns that lesson, oh, it's easy. A child at 10 might take a punch or two in the nose, and it's a tougher lesson. At 20, it might be a prison cell to learn that lesson.
Yeah.
So I think it's reasonable to explain to him that, here's what you're going to do. Here's the way you're going to treat him. And the money that I offer to you, particularly brought to the surface because of your your poor behavior, is that I'm going to make what I give you conditional on you being reasonable in your home with your mother. And, maybe explain to him, that's not what's been modeled for him, and you understand that. But he's got some tools, and he's got the support to do it differently. And that, one of the conditions of, whether it's the money for the, the rehearsal or the service and maybe they're all tied together. You can't have one without the other. You can't just get by. Well, if you do the rehearsal and you ignore the rest, $50 a week is all you need, so you're happy with that. No, there are demands. It's reasonable to make demands on a child. And so I think in the posture you're in, and he's old enough to recognize it. He probably won't like it, but he's old enough to recognize that. In this case, like an employer, you hold the purse strings, and you're willing to be liberal and supportive with him, but he's got to give something in return. It's not going to happen for nothing. And it's reasonable. I would offer that it would be reasonable to tie one with the other with the other. If you just skip the service when you're expected to be there, then you just collapsed all of that support. Or you don't get to just do the rehearsal and ignore the Sunday service when that's what you're rehearsing for. Those two are tied together. Yeah, if you do your chores, and one of your chores is to be reasonably respectful with your mother. And if you don't do that, then I'm going to withdraw. I'm just going to be real clear up front. This money is conditional on what you do. So it is your choice whether or not you get it. It's not mine. You're not going to remove it from him. His own behavior will remove it from him. And I think that's a reasonable way to talk to a kid of 20, whatever emotional condition he's in, and, of course, recognizing that he's had a whole lot of terrorism put into his life, and he's learned the lesson well, and he's trying to see how it works. And when you can teach him lovingly, gently, and respectfully that it doesn't work, you don't have to condemn him for, raging at his mother. You can just say, that behavior doesn't work. That isn't how human beings function. And I'm not going to reward you for functioning like that. You don't have to say he's bad or wrong or anything else. Just like, that's not here's what I want to support in the world. Here's how I'm going to treat you. Here's the commitment in writing. And here's what I'm going to support you for by living up to what my life and my world is about. And I think those kinds of things are a very reasonable thing to do, especially with a kid of 20.
That sounds really good. And you make me realize you have triggered
nothing like a little support from our friends.
I know. I'm terrified of his anger. It reminds me of his dad. And when his dad thought I was an untrustworthy bitch, which are exact words that he used, I believed him for 25 years and thought, I want to prove to him and the world that I'm not an untrustworthy bitch, but there was no way that he was ever going to care about me.
Yeah.
And
so notice he's a thought terrorist.
Yes, he is.
That's what he is. And his son has learned some of the same.
Yeah.
So, you at this stage, except through critical mass, you're not likely going to have a whole lot of impact on him, but you certainly can have a significant impact on his son, because you are the source of reward for behaviors that you've agreed to. And so, again, my take is, you're coming in there out of the blue, giving this young man money. I think it's very reasonable for you to put conditions on it. He's got a condition on you. So I want the money. That's the condition he has on you. Okay, now I'm going to have some conditions, and here's how it's going to work. I will provide this if you live up to these expectations. It doesn't mean that he's never going to fail, that he's never going to fall, but then, perhaps that's the place to put in, and there's some work to do to clean up the parts of your mind, and, maybe even explain to him the whole idea, or maybe even let him listen to the show of thought terrorism, and that's how his father treated him, and so it's natural, that's what he's doing. And it's not, notice, Jacob, how that's working in your dad's life. Not very well. And it will never work in your life either. So I'm not going to reward it. I'm just not going to play.
Michael,
and here's how I am going to play. I promise to trust you enough to tell you the truth and treat you lovingly, gently, and with respect. My thoughts, my words, my actions, whether I'm in your presence or not. I'm here to hold the space for you. And I'm going to use gentle voice tones, and I'm going to honor you. I'm going to treat you with the presence of love in me, whatever you do. And if you'll take that on, start to do that, then I'm willing to extend reward to you and support you. Otherwise, I'm not.
That's great. It's like love bombing him while holding him accountable. And that's probably the only hope we have of getting through, because he was so mistreated that he thinks the world is against him.
Yeah.
So this commitment sheet is a piece of gold. Michael, can I have the most recent version?
Yeah, I'll text you what I just read. That is the most recent version. So I'll text it to you. You can make it up and print it off and send it to him. For sure.
Yeah, because that one is not on the website, Michael.
And resolve.
Right. Yeah.
So go ahead and take the next caller, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, we're here to hold the space, and you're making a mega contribution and difference in the world, interrupting these patterns in your family system. It's monumental. So we're absolutely here to hold the space for it, young lady. All right, Miss Jeannie, I will send this to you as well. And let's say hello to our next caller.
I'll have to update that on the website.
Okay.
So,
Yep.
Okay, next caller is Miss Magda, 828. You're on the air.
Hello, you guys. Wonderful to talk with you.
How do you be, young lady? You've been on my mind. I've actually been going to call you for about 5 days. I've got a video link I want to send to you, but things have just been a little hectic here, so I'll do that.
Wonderful. Thank you. And would you please send me a copy of the new commitment as well?
I certainly will, yes.
I knew you had changed something, but I didn't know what it was. That was my main reason for calling, was to give a testimonial, because you were talking about it before, of the power of that commitment. You had suggested that Chuck and I do it together every day, and we have been for months and months now, and it is really wonderful. We start the day off that way, and no matter what else that happens before the rest of the day goes on, we do it together. Sometimes one of us will read the whole thing to the other, and sometimes we'll take turns with different parts of it, and we end up laughing and giggling quite a bit because it just brings so much joy. And so, I recommend that for anyone and everyone, and maybe Jeannie can tell the story about the man who used it with his wife and his results, even though she didn't know about it. That was a cool story. And
yes.
So that was my first thing, was testimonial. And then I also wanted to comment on what you were going through with Susan. And I fully agree with what you said, Jeannie, about giving the person a choice. And it really applies to adults just as well as kids. It is better if I'm huffing and puffing because I've been doing some work around here. If we can start out when they're little, then they realize that they have choices, and choices have consequences, and so it's cool. But if they haven't been exposed to that, and they need to learn it, and it's very good to learn it later, that can work too. It's just a little bumpier to get there. And what you were saying about the difference between, what I heard was a discussion that clearly identified the difference between unconditional love and unconditional acceptance of the person without unconditional acceptance of their behavior. And that's really important.
Right. And I would shift the languaging about the love to, because, if I say don't think about the color of your car, of course, what fires in brain cells but the color of your car. When I use the term unconditional love, what fires in the mind but all the conditions it could attach to it, where when we shift into the language of all embracing love, then the mind goes into agreement with, I'm heading for all embracing love rather than unconditional, because as long as I'm talking about unconditional, there's a part of my mind that's reserving, if it happens, there'll be something different happen here. Whereas when I enter into the practice of whoever you do, you could be Satan and Hitler and, Mussolini and all of them put in one, and I'm going to stand as a space of active present love. It's not conditional upon what you do, and I choose to embrace myself and the whole creation in that. Right. Now, that doesn't mean I have to behave the way you might want me to behave, but I can be that space and hold that space in an all-embracing way.
I really like that terminology, all-embracing love. So what would be the parallel if we talk about, well, I guess it's conditional behavior. That's what you're really talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, I can. I'm going to, in this case, young man, I'm going to hold you in this space. Whatever you do,
mm-hmm.
my behavior isn't based on or predicated on what you do in terms of the space I hold you in, but how I reward you with my money is definitely based on and conditional upon your behavior. Because I'm not interested in rewarding poor behavior. I just, I don't want to live there. And anybody who does would have to be insane.
Right. Good. Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
All inclusive. Very good. And that's a good one.
All encompassing, all embracive, all inclusive, yes. Words that indicate that and the primary reason for that is I want to indicate to my mind how I want to function.
Yes.
And my mind's been programmed like everybody else with all kinds of conflicting stuff. So as I get deeper and deeper clarity, the new line that's been added to the commitment came from some voice tones that I discovered myself using that I didn't particularly like in my body. And certainly I'm sure that anybody I used them with wasn't, overjoyed at it. So that's the newest piece of that I'm going to utilize voice tones that indicate my total caring and embrace of you.
That's great.
And it's just another subtle piece that, we can say, well, I'm treating you lovingly, gently, and with respect. But, when you did that yesterday, like, well, that's not quite an indicator of loving, gentle, respectful space being held. And, it's subtle, but the mind can play all kinds of games. The tricks it can play are unlimited, even on ourselves. So that's where that piece came into the commitment.
Well, I'm liking that, the idea of all embracing, all inclusive, to not only think about other people that way, but of course, my relationship with myself.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, good definition.
Yeah. And it ultimately leads to me recognizing that the number one thing I need to be concerned about in my life is, do I maintain my own human life? Because love is my human life. When I give it up, I've lost my life. I may be able to walk and talk and I look and sound like a person, but there's no life in there. If you define, our definition of life that I found to be most useful is that life is love flowing through a cell. If I do something, even with my voice tones that inhibits that, it's my life that I'm losing. I may think I'm doing it to someone else, but it's all smoke and mirrors. If I put an inhibitor into love flowing through my cellular structure, I'm the one that's in trouble.
Because we always
and so I'm committed. Yeah, and I'm committed to maintaining my human life regardless of what happens in the world.
Cool. I love it.
And of course, where does intelligence come from? The mind of the past that replicates, or a live, aware being called love that has the genius of what in the ancient teachings they called the mind of Christ. Literally, that we have that mind available to us, and that is the mind of love. Nothing religious about it. It's just, where do you want to live?
Indeed.
Yep. And our culture teaches us to live in the mind of the past.
I'm going to add one more thing before I sign off. I need to go and finish something. And so, in regard to the commitment, we sometimes have fun with it as a way of bringing attention to ourselves or the other person, that what they're doing or the way they're sounding does not coincide with what the commitment had said, what we said through the commitment in the morning. And so it's just going to that one line and kind of looking each other in the eye and just repeating that one thing, and then we can have a chuckle about it. And there's
a chuckle.
A chuckle. Yeah.
Hey, Chuck.
Yeah. So anyway, maybe someone else can utilize it that way too. So I'll listen to the rest, but I need to sign off right now.
Okay. Let me just, seeing as how we're on the phone and you've shared in the past the challenges with your blood pressure and that you've been working on it, the reason I was going to call you was to ask you, if you don't mind, how you're doing with that.
I had an appointment with a cardiologist last week, and he took me off of one of the medications, which I'm really, really terrifically happy about. So I will have an appointment in a few weeks to have echo done so that they can find out if my heart is stronger now. And it should be, because I've been using a treadmill 30 to 40 minutes a day. And
awesome.
Yeah, so after that, I'll get together with the cardiologist again, and we'll see what happens. But right now, everything's good. Yeah. And anything that you come across that is about relieving blood pressure problems, I'm open to it.
Well, I will send you this link directly, and I'll send it to you, Jeannie, as well, to put on the website so anybody has access to it. But it is a mind-boggling, to me, piece of information that just is like a whole new piece to the puzzle that nobody has known, literally, in history that I know of. And these physicians came up with it's so mind-boggling when you watch it that you'll, I think, just love it. And what they've discovered
I'm glad you gave me a little. I don't want to wait.
Right. Well, what they've discovered is that uric acid to almost all degenerative disease and high blood pressure being one of them. And this is not a piece of information I've seen anywhere in the culture in 50 years of, being in the health field. And what they're showing, you might remember a few years ago, sugar was the bad guy. And they brought out fructose and said, see, fruit juice and fructose, there's the new sweetener, the wonderful sweetener. And now we've got high fructose corn syrup in virtually everything, including little kids' drinks and foods. And it's disgusting. But what they discovered is that fructose and regular sugar, a component of it is fructose and a component of it is sucrose. So it has the same problem, but fructose itself, the reason why they said it was a healthy sweetener is because it didn't raise blood sugar. It didn't count on the pancreas for metabolism. But what happens is it's metabolized by the liver. And when we start using fructose all the time, the liver gets overwhelmed and the liver converts it to fat, and now people have fatty liver disease, which is, unless you do some really sophisticated testing, the average physician is never going to find and doesn't know much about anyway. But fructose leads to fatty liver disease, leads to the production of uric acid, leads to people getting fat, and leads to people getting high blood pressure. Uric acid,
I hope you send that today. Yeah, right.
Say again?
I hope you send that today. I want to see.
Oh, I will. I'm getting ready to paste it in a text to you right now, and I'll send it to you, Jeannie, so you can put it in the notes for me who wants it. I mean, it's mind-boggling. It's actually, I mentioned the other day, if you were listening, another video to watch, and it's done by the same group, and it's actually University of California Medical School. And watch the video, take the time. You both will, I think, really enjoy it, especially with the way you're into food and growing food and such, a video called Foodgate on YouTube. And then and they go into, in this video, Foodgate, how the tobacco industry came to con the world for decades that nicotine wasn't addictive.
Right.
Guess who set up, and this is all covered in this video, Foodgate, guess who set up the tobacco industry to be able to pull that con for so many decades and cost millions of lives? The guy who did the same thing for the sugar industry 25 years earlier. Same guy, same con job, and it's still going on.
Wow. That is for sure.
Right to the point. I mean, they go into, in Foodgate, they go into how the sugar industry went to two researchers at Harvard University and paid them off to tell people that fat was the problem. Remember in the 70s, 80s? Oh, high-fat diet, that's the problem.
Right.
Guess who set that up? It was the sugar industry. And what they knew is, they literally, this guy in Foodgate quotes, he shows that, the document, quotes how the sugar industry literally said, if we can get people to believe this high-fat diet is the problem, we'll sell a third more sugar to them. Because you'll notice everywhere that there's low fat, there's added sugar to make up for the taste.
That's right. Wow.
And then sugar. Oh man, it's just mind-boggling. And then when you take, you look at Foodgate and look at how that unfolds, and then you see that the sugar, which is partly sucrose and partly fructose, so it goes to the liver and creates this problem. And then, fruit juice. They're like, don't touch fruit juice. And he goes into actually explaining how the different types of bulk in a whole food actually block the pathways that end up allowing, leaky gut syndrome. The whole thing is just mind-boggling when you look at it. And the story covers 15 million years. They went back to genes that were resurrected from apes 15 million years ago to understand this.
And Michael, do they have recommendations? Do they have recommendations? Do they have recommendations?
Yes.
For what we should be? Yeah, good. I understand.
Eat whole food.
Right.
The basic recommendation is eat whole food. You start refining it, you're in trouble.
Yeah. I understand that fatty liver has become much more pervasive in younger people, younger and younger all the time. Yeah.
Well, what he points out, what they point out here is that diabetes, for instance, used to be a disease of alcoholics. We've only got 60 seconds. But now they've got kids at 8 and 10 years of age that are exhibiting the diseases of the alcoholic. Why? It's because of the fructose going into the liver, and it's creating the same alcoholic syndrome as alcohol did, because alcohol is basically a sugar. But instead of being 60 years of age, these kids are now 8 years of age that are getting the liver diseases of the alcoholic at 60 because they're being force-fed fructose. Go look at the sugar and the fructose even in the little kids' foods. There's some of them now that are getting conscious enough to take it out. But anyway, it's all mind-boggling. We're down to the last few seconds. I'll send it to you. Everybody have the best year yet of your eternal life. I'll send it to Jeannie so she can put it in the notes so it's accessible to everybody. Thank you. Blessings. Bye-bye.